You know that feeling when you are lying in bed at night and the house is completely quiet and everyone else is asleep and your mind just will not stop. You are staring at the ceiling, replaying conversations, rethinking decisions, wondering why certain things have not worked out yet, wondering if they ever will. And it is not just tiredness, it is something deeper, something heavier, the kind of exhaustion that sleep does not fix, the kind that has been sitting in your chest for weeks, maybe months, quietly asking the same question over and over again. Is any of this going the way it was supposed to? Maybe you are grieving something nobody around you fully understands, a dream that stalled, a relationship that ended, a version of yourself you thought you would be by now. Maybe you have been doing everything right, working hard, staying patient, trying to be a good person, and it still feels like nothing is moving. And the worst part is not even the struggle itself. The worst part is the silence around it, the fact that you are carrying this alone, the fact that you wake up every morning and put on a version of yourself that looks fine, that functions, that moves through the day, while something deeper in you is quietly exhausted and quietly wondering if any of this is ever going to change. If that is where you are right now, stay with me, because what I am about to share with you are not motivational quotes, not empty words dressed up to sound wise. These are real lessons, the kind you learn in the dark, the kind that crack you open before they put you back together, stronger than before. 10 lessons. And once they truly sink in, not just understood, but felt, lived, and finally believed, you will not be who you were before you heard them. Before we begin, type this in the comments and mean it. I am ready now. Lesson 1. One day, you will look back at the door that closed and finally thank God it did. Have you ever wanted something so badly it physically hurt to not have it? Not a casual want, a deep, desperate, this has to work kind of wanting. The kind where you prayed about it, lost sleep over it, built your whole picture of the future around it, and then it did not happen. The door closed, the person left, the opportunity fell through. The plan collapsed completely, and you were left standing there wondering what you did wrong, wondering why, wondering if maybe you just were not enough. That season, that painful, confusing, faith-testing season of waiting and not understanding, is one of the hardest places a human being can live. Because in that waiting, a particular kind of doubt moves in. It does not knock. It just arrives and starts rearranging everything inside you. Maybe I am not good enough. Maybe this is not meant for me. Maybe I have been fooling myself this whole time. And the longer the wait stretches, the louder those voices get. But here is what I want you to do. And I need you to actually sit with this and not just move past it. Think back to a moment in your life when something you desperately wanted did not happen. A door that slammed shut, a person who left, a plan that completely fell apart, a prayer that seemed to go completely unanswered. Now ask yourself honestly, where did that closed door eventually lead you? Because looking back at real lives, at real stories of people who have walked through real darkness, there is a pattern that becomes impossible to ignore. The moments that felt the most like destruction were very often, quietly, protection. The relationship that ended and left you devastated was redirecting you towards something better. The opportunity you thought you missed was making room for something more aligned. The plan that collapsed completely forced you to build something more genuinely yours, something you would never have discovered if the original path had simply worked out the way you wanted. The great Aristotle once said, "Everything happens for a reason and at the right time." Not everything happens at the time you want. Not everything arrives the way you planned. But everything, when you look back with honest eyes, happened at exactly the time it needed to. Delays are not denials. Say that again to yourself, slowly. Delays are not denials. God, the universe, life, whatever name you give to the force greater than your own understanding, does not work on your schedule. And the hardest truth about faith is that it requires trust in what you cannot yet see. Trust that the pause has a purpose. Trust that the detour is not a mistake. Trust that the closed door is not abandonment, but redirection. You are not being forgotten in the waiting. You are being shaped by it. Things are being built inside you right now. Patience, depth, resilience, wisdom, clarity about what you actually want and what you do not. These things cannot be rushed without being ruined. And circumstances are being arranged outside of you, timing, alignment, readiness, that require more pieces to fall into place before the right door opens. The version of you from 2 years ago genuinely could not have handled what you are walking into now. The things you have learned in the waiting, about yourself, about people, about what really matters, those are not small things. Those are the very things that will allow you to sustain what is coming. So, while you are in the wait, while you are in the in-between, the uncomfortable, the uncertain, stay in it with intention. Keep learning, keep growing, keep showing up even when it feels pointless. Keep your hands open even when everything in you wants to force something into them. Because one day, and this day will come, you will look back at the exact door you were begging to open, the one that stayed closed while you wept outside it, and you will finally, fully understand. And when that day comes, you will not just feel relieved, you will be grateful. If you believe God's timing is never wrong, prove it right now in the comments. I trust my delays. Lesson 2. For your peace, keep some of yourself to yourself. Silence about your life is a form of self-love. Think about the last time you told someone something personal, something real, something that mattered deeply to you, and later wished with everything in you that you had not. Maybe they used it against you. Maybe they shared it with someone who had no business knowing. Maybe they just responded in a way that made you feel foolish for opening up. Maybe nothing dramatic happened at all. They just did not hold it with the care it deserved. And you walked away feeling exposed in a way that stayed with you long after the conversation ended. That feeling, that quiet regret of having let the wrong person in, is one of the most common and least talked about wounds people carry silently every single day. We live in a world that has made oversharing feel like courage. Social media convinced us that visibility equals value, that being fully known is the same as being fully loved, that sharing every layer of yourself, your fears, your plans, your wounds, your dreams, your progress, your setbacks, is what authentic and brave people do. And yes, real vulnerability in safe spaces, with people who have genuinely earned it, is one of the most powerful things a human being can offer another. It builds real connection. It creates real intimacy. It is a genuinely beautiful thing when it happens in the right place. But here is what the culture of oversharing does not tell you. Not every person who is curious about you is safe for you. Not everyone who asks questions is asking from a place of genuine care. Not everyone who listens is listening with your best interest at heart. Some people ask about your plans so they can quietly doubt them to themselves or worse, to others. Some people want to know your wounds because understanding where you are vulnerable gives them a quiet kind of power. Some people observe your dreams and file them away, not to support you, but to measure themselves against you. Not all of them, not even most, but some. And the painful truth is you often cannot tell which ones until the information is already out there and the damage is already done. The great philosopher Plato reminded us, the first and greatest victory is to conquer yourself. And part of conquering yourself is conquering the impulse to give everyone access to the parts of you that are still healing, still growing, still becoming. Part of self-mastery is knowing not just what to share, but who deserves to receive it. Privacy is not coldness. Privacy is not dishonesty. Privacy is not fear. Privacy is protection. And keeping some of yourself to yourself is a genuine and powerful act of self-love. The wisest people carry a specific quality that is hard to name but impossible to miss. They are warm, they are present, they make you feel genuinely seen and heard. But there is a reserve about them, a quiet dignity, a sense that they are giving you their full attention while still holding something of themselves carefully protected. Not in a damaged or fearful way, in a wise and deeply intentional way. That quality is not aloofness. It is self-respect expressed through discretion. Learn to observe before you open up. Let people show you over time, across different circumstances, across different seasons, who they actually are before you show them who you truly are. And when someone has genuinely earned access, when they have proven consistently and clearly that they handle what you share with care, then open the door. But your healing is not a story for everyone. Your goals do not need an audience before they have a foundation. Your pain is not entertainment for people who are only mildly invested in your life. Keep some of yourself to yourself. Not because you are ashamed, not because you are closed off from the world, but because you understand your own value. Because you know that the most precious things, the most sacred parts of who you are simply not meant for every room. Your silence about your life is not a wall, it is wisdom, and it will protect far more than you currently know. If you are done giving everyone access to you, claim this below. I protect my peace. Lesson 3. The truth requires no memory. Lies are the heaviest things a person can carry. Cast your mind back to a lie you have told. Not necessarily a big dramatic one, a small one. The kind most of us tell without even fully registering it as a lie. I am fine. When you were not, I agree. When you did not, I will be there. When you already knew you would not. Small things, harmless on the surface, easy to justify. But notice what happened afterward. Even with the small ones, there is a faint but real weight that follows them. A low-level awareness that you are now managing something, that you have to remember what you said, that you have to make sure your behavior lines up with the version of things you presented to another person. Now multiply that by every lie, big or small, that has been told and maintained over months, years, sometimes an entire lifetime. That weight does not stay the same. It compounds. And what starts as a small and seemingly harmless evasion becomes an invisible and exhausting structure that has to be maintained every single day without rest. Because here is the thing about lies that people rarely talk about with real honesty. Maintaining a lie requires constant energy. You have to remember what you said, to whom and when. You have to ensure your stories stay consistent across different people and different conversations. You have to manage how you are perceived at all times. You have to build scaffolding around a structure that is not solid and reinforce that scaffolding every single time someone gets close enough to notice the cracks. And the energy you spend on all of that, maintaining false versions of yourself, managing constructed narratives, keeping people at a precise distance where they believe exactly what you need them to believe, that energy is being actively stolen from your real life. From real connection, from real growth, from the real and genuinely fulfilling work of becoming who you actually want to be. Plato, one of the greatest minds who ever lived, believed this deeply. He said, "Truth is the beginning of every good thing, not comfort, not strategy, not image management, truth." Everything good in a human life, real relationships, real peace, real confidence, real freedom, begins with truth. And everything built on anything other than truth is built on ground that will eventually shift beneath you. The truth, by contrast, is extraordinarily clean, not always comfortable, not always easy to say. Sometimes telling the truth costs you something real, a relationship that could not survive honesty, a comfortable dynamic that required your silence to function, an image that was built on something that was not quite real. But once the truth is said, it is done. It stands completely on its own. It needs nothing more from you. It does not wake you up at 3 in the morning because you said something 6 months ago that now needs to be carefully kept straight. It does not create quiet consequences that compound in the background of your life year after year. People who live consistently in truth carry themselves differently. There is a lightness to them, an ease, a confidence that does not come from arrogance. It comes from the simple and profound freedom of having nothing to hide. They do not calculate which version of themselves to present in each room. They do not track their stories across different audiences. They are simply themselves, fully and completely, in every room, with every person. That freedom, radical and simple and available to anyone willing to choose it, is one of the most underrated gifts you can give yourself. Tell the truth, even when it is uncomfortable, especially when it is uncomfortable. You will never have to remember anything, and you will carry a lightness you may have forgotten was even possible. Lesson 4. Your time is the one thing you can never earn back. Spend it like it matters, because it does. Picture someone in your life right now, and be completely honest with yourself. Do not skip past this. Someone who takes more than they give. Someone who calls when they need something and goes quiet when they do not. Someone who listens to your struggles for 30 seconds before steering the entire conversation back to themselves. Someone whose name appearing on your phone produces a feeling that is something noticeably less than joy. You know exactly who this person is. Maybe it is one person, maybe it is several. And despite knowing, despite that feeling in your chest every time their name appears, you keep showing up, you keep answering, you keep giving your time, your energy, your attention, your care, your presence, because you are a good person, because you believe in people, because somewhere deep down you hope that if you give enough, the dynamic will eventually shift into something that feels more equal, more real, more worth it. But here is the truth that not enough people are saying clearly enough. Not everyone who wants your time deserves it. And giving it to them unconditionally is not generosity. It is a slow and quiet and deeply costly form of self-neglect. Seneca, the Roman philosopher who understood life more deeply than most, warned us with words that are as true today as they were 2,000 years ago. He said, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it. We waste it on people who do not value our presence. We waste it on conversations that drain us. We waste it on situations we should have walked away from long before we did. And then we wonder why we feel empty, why we feel behind, why we feel like life is passing while we are standing still. Time is different from everything else you have. It is different from money. It is different from energy in the abstract. Time is the literal substance of your life. Every hour that passes is a piece of your finite existence on this earth that is gone with a completeness that nothing else matches. You can recover financial losses. You can rebuild damaged friendships. You can restore your health and your confidence and your reputation. But you cannot, with any amount of effort or money or desperate wishing, recover a single second of lost time. Every hour spent with someone who drains you is an hour not spent building something that matters. Every yes to something that takes from you without giving anything real back is at the exact same moment a no to something that could have grown you, nourished you, or simply given you the peace you have been searching for. Start treating your time the way you would treat something you absolutely cannot afford to lose, because it is more valuable than anything you own, because it is, in the most literal and undeniable sense, your life itself. Spend it where it is respected. Spend it with people who value your presence and not just your usefulness. Spend it on things that are building something real inside you or in the world around you or in the lives of people who genuinely receive what you give. That is not selfishness. That is not coldness. That is not a betrayal of your generous nature. That is what it finally looks like to take your own life seriously. If you are finally choosing yourself, drop this in the comments like you mean it. I value my time. Lesson 5. When someone refuses to hear you, your silence will say everything your words never could. Remember a conversation, maybe not that long ago, where no matter what you said, no matter how carefully you chose your words, it simply was not landing. You were explaining yourself with everything you had, trying a different angle when the first one did not work, restating, clarifying, restructuring your entire argument to try to find a way through. And none of it was reaching them. Not because your words were not clear, not because you were failing to communicate, but because they had already decided, before you ever opened your mouth, what they believed. About you, about the situation, about who was right and who was wrong. And the more you pushed, the more frustrated you became. The more frustrated you became, the less clearly you spoke. And somehow by the end of it you had said things you did not mean, revealed emotions you did not want to show, and given someone who did not value your words even more material to use against you. What would have happened if you had simply stopped and said nothing? The wise Plato once drew a clear and permanent line between wisdom and foolishness. He said, "Wise men speak because they have something to say, fools because they have to say something." That line is everything. Silence, chosen deliberately by someone who genuinely knows their own worth, is not weakness. It is not defeat. It is not the absence of something to say. It is not submission or smallness or giving in. It is the quiet and completely dignified choice of a person who has decided that not every space deserves their voice. When you choose silence with someone who is not genuinely listening, who has already decided and simply wants you to surrender to their version of things, you are not losing. You are refusing to play a game that was specifically designed for you to lose. You are communicating without a single word. I know exactly who I am, and your interpretation of me changes absolutely nothing. People who always need to respond, always need to defend themselves, always need the final word, they are operating from a place of deep insecurity. They need to win because losing feels like complete annihilation. They need to control the narrative because without that control they do not feel safe. But you, if you have truly learned this lesson, are operating from somewhere entirely different, somewhere quieter, somewhere far more solid and unshakable. You do not need to win the argument to know you are right. You do not need their understanding to maintain your peace. You do not need to correct every mischaracterization, respond to every accusation, or defend yourself against every unfair interpretation of who you are. You can let people be completely wrong about you and remain fully and completely intact. Your silence in those moments is not the absence of strength. It is the fullest and most powerful expression of it. Choose your battles with great care. And when a battle would cost you your peace without gaining you anything real in return, walk away. Let silence be your answer. It will say everything your words never could. If you are done wasting your words on people who refuse to hear you, say this out loud and then write it. I choose my silence. Lesson 6. You will recover from failure, but you will never fully recover from never having tried. Close your eyes for a moment or just stay fully present with this and think about something you have been putting off. Not a small thing, the one that comes back to you when the world gets quiet and there is nothing left to distract you. The one you have almost started a dozen times and talked yourself out of every single time. The business, the conversation you need to have. The move you keep considering, the dream you keep returning to, the leap you keep standing at the edge of and stepping back from because the ground below is not visible. Now fast forward your entire life. Picture yourself much older, looking back at everything, the whole sweep of your life, every season, every chapter, every moment. And in that looking back, you arrive at this exact moment in time. Right now, this season you are in right now, where you had the chance, where the possibility was completely real, where the only thing standing between you and attempting it was fear, and you never moved, not because you tried and it did not work. That is a different story entirely. a brave story even when it ends in failure, but because you never tried at all, because fear felt safer than the risk, because you kept waiting for confidence that never came, for the perfect moment that kept not arriving, for a certainty that was never promised to anyone who has ever built anything real. Sit with what that feels like. Do not rush past it. Really sit with it. Now hear this as clearly as you have ever heard anything. Seneca, who studied human suffering and human fear more deeply than almost anyone in history, wrote words that have survived 2,000 years because of how completely true they are. He said, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." Read that again. We suffer more in imagination than in reality. The failure you are afraid of, the rejection you are bracing for, the humiliation you are certain will come if you try and fall short. In almost every case, it is not as catastrophic in reality as it is in the story your fear is telling you. People survive failure every single day. People lose everything and find a way to rebuild. People try their absolute hardest, fall completely short, and discover in that falling something more valuable than success would have given them. Failure is survivable. That is not an opinion. That is the lived experience of every person who has ever built anything worth building, and failure carries something invaluable with it. Proof. Proof that you showed up. That you were brave enough to enter, that you cared enough about something to risk looking foolish in front of other people for it. Every scar from a genuine attempt is evidence of a life that was actually fully lived. But regret is a completely different creature, and it deserves to be called what it actually is. Regret does not heal the way wounds heal. It does not become something you can tell with hard-won pride. It does not soften with time. It grows in the silence of what was never attempted. It compounds quietly, year after year, widening the gap between who you are and who you could have become, between the life you are living and the life that was possible. And the cruelest part is that you will never know what would have happened. All you will ever have is the wondering, and the wondering never stops. Do it afraid. Feel every bit of the fear and move anyway. You do not have to feel ready. Readiness comes after the attempt, not before it. You do not have to feel confident. Confidence is built through action, not gifted before it begins. You will recover from failure. That is a genuine promise, but you will carry the weight of never having tried for the rest of your life. Choose the braver option. If fear has held you still long enough, this one is your declaration. Leave it below. I move despite fear. Lesson 7. Everything you are still meant to become is ahead of you. Stop turning around. Be honest with yourself for a moment. And I mean genuinely honest, not the surface kind that feels good, but does not actually look at anything real. How much of your daily mental and emotional energy goes backward? Replaying that conversation that ended badly. Rethinking that decision you made years ago. Revisiting that relationship that still has unresolved weight attached to it. Carrying that mistake like it says something permanent and defining about who you are as a person. Holding on to a version of yourself, the one who failed, the one who was left, the one who said the wrong thing, the one who missed the opportunity, and letting that version speak louder and with more authority than everything else you have ever been or done. If you could add it all up, all the hours, all the mental energy, all the emotional capacity spent living inside what is already finished and completely beyond changing, what could you have built with all of that instead? The ancient Greek philosopher Epictetus understood something about change and time that most people spend their entire lives resisting. He said, "No man steps in the same river twice, for it is not the same river, and he is not the same man. You are not the same person who made that mistake. You are not the same person who was in that relationship. You are not the same person who failed at that thing or missed that chance. The river has moved. You have moved." And standing at the bank staring at water that is already long gone does not bring it back. It only keeps you from seeing the river that is flowing right in front of you now. Your past cannot be changed. Not one single moment of it. Not one word said, not one choice made, not one thing that happened or failed to happen. It is fixed and finished and completely beyond the reach of anything you do today or tomorrow or ever. So, the only question that actually matters is this: what do you do with it? You can carry it as a burden that defines you. You can let the worst chapters of your story speak louder than every other chapter combined. You can allow the hardest moments of who you were to permanently set the ceiling for who you believe you are allowed to become. Or, and this takes more courage than most people give it credit for, you can let the past be exactly what it actually is, and nothing more than that. A teacher, not a warden. Take what it taught you. Take the hard-won wisdom, the clarity about what you genuinely need, the deep understanding of what you can and cannot survive, the knowledge of what matters and what does not. Those lessons were forged at a genuine cost, and they belong entirely to you. They have real and lasting value, but release them from their position of authority over your present life. Stop allowing your most painful seasons to set the permanent boundaries of what is still possible for you. You are not only the worst thing that ever happened to you. You are not permanently and completely defined by your lowest moment. You are a person still being written, still becoming, still capable of changes and growth and transformation that would genuinely surprise you if you allowed them to happen. Everything you are still meant to become is ahead of you. Every relationship that can still bring you real and lasting joy. Every dream that is still worth pursuing. Every version of yourself, wiser, freer, more fully and completely alive than the version still carrying all that old weight. That version is still available, still waiting, still entirely possible. But none of it, not a single part of it, is accessible while you are turned around living inside what is already gone. Face forward. Your future is not somewhere impossibly far away. It is in the choices you make today, in this moment. In whether you keep turning around to look at the wreckage or whether you finally, deliberately, with everything you have left, turn back toward what is still ahead of you. Go toward it. If you are making the decision right now to stop living in your past, lock it in the comments. I face forward only. Lesson 8. When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. There is no second lesson, only a second wound. Think about a time you ignored a sign. Not because you did not see it, you saw it, you felt it. Something happened, something was said or done or noticeably not done, and a quiet but completely clear part of you registered it, filed it carefully away, felt the warning move through you like a current, and then you talked yourself out of it. They were just having a bad day. That is not really who they are. Maybe I am being too sensitive about this. Things will be different going forward. And so you stayed, or you went back, or you extended another chance that was never genuinely asked for with any real accountability or any real change behind it. And then it happened again. That second time, that second wound that did not have to happen, is exactly what this lesson is about. Because the first time something or someone hurts you, that is simply life doing what life inevitably does. You trusted someone you did not yet fully know. You believed in something that had not yet revealed its full nature. You stayed because leaving requires a kind of courage that is genuinely hard to find when you care deeply about something. The first time is called experience. And experience, as painful as it always is one of the most valuable things life can offer you. It is the world handing you real and usable information about people and situations and what they are actually capable of. Seneca, who chose his companions with extraordinary care and thought deeply about who deserved access to his time and energy, left us this clear and lasting guidance. He said, "Associate with people who are likely to improve you, not people who drain you. Not people who repeatedly hurt you and apologize and hurt you again." Not people who show you clearly who they are and then ask you to believe the version they present when things are calm. People who genuinely, consistently, over real time, make you better simply by being in your life. When someone shows you who they are clearly and unmistakably, and you set that information aside because accepting it means making a hard and painful decision, and then they show you again, that second showing is no longer new information. That second wound is not a lesson. It is a consequence of choosing not to believe the first one. This is not about becoming hard or closed or permanently unavailable to second chances. Genuine second chances, given to people who have done real work, who have genuinely reckoned with their behavior, who have shown real and sustained change over real time, those are beautiful and absolutely worth extending. But a second chance handed to someone who simply waited long enough for you to miss them is not generosity or love or loyalty. That is hope being quietly and consistently used against your own well-being. Learn fast, not bitterly, not in a way that closes you completely off from the world and from people, but clearly, in a deeply self-respecting way that honors what you have already survived. When life shows you who someone is, believe it, receive it. Let it genuinely inform how you move forward from that moment, because you already proved you can survive the first wound. You got through it. You are standing here right now. You deserve a life that does not require you to keep learning the same lesson from the same source over and over and over again. Believe what you are shown the first time. If you are finally done going back to what already hurt you, make this promise to yourself right here. I trust what I see. Lesson 9. You have already failed 1,000 times in your mind. None of it was real, but all of it held you back. Somewhere in your mind right now, maybe buried quietly beneath everything else, maybe sitting right at the surface where you can feel it constantly, there is a goal or a dream or a possibility that you have already imagined failing at. Not once, many times, in vivid and emotionally convincing and completely exhausting detail. You have pictured applying and being rejected, felt the full sting of it, the embarrassment, the quiet confirmation of everything you secretly fear about yourself, and decided based entirely on that imagined outcome not to apply at all. You have imagined saying the thing you genuinely need to say, felt the raw vulnerability of it, felt the risk of a bad or dismissive response, and stayed completely silent instead. You have imagined starting the thing, felt the very real risk of falling short publicly, of people watching you try and not make it, and stayed safely in the familiar discomfort of simply never starting. And in every single one of those cases, nothing actually happened. No real rejection landed. No real bad response came. No real failure occurred. But something was lost anyway, because you allowed a completely imagined outcome to produce a completely real consequence. Another day of not moving, another week of the gap between who you are and who you could be, staying exactly the same size it was before. Seneca saw through the nature of human fear with a clarity that still cuts through everything centuries later. He wrote, "We are more often frightened than hurt, and we suffer more in imagination than in reality. More often frightened than actually hurt. More suffering in imagination than in reality." Think about how much of your life has been shaped not by things that actually happened to you, but by things you were terrified might happen and never did. Think about how many doors you did not walk through because your imagination had already shown you everything that could go wrong on the other side. Your mind does not cleanly separate what you vividly imagine from what you actually experience. The anxiety of imagined rejection sends the exact same signals through your body as real rejection does. The stress of imagined failure creates the exact same emotional and mental patterns as actual failure. And when that becomes your permanent baseline, when you are living in a constant low-level hum of anticipated loss and anticipated humiliation, your real performance in your real life begins to reflect it completely. You enter rooms already braced and already shrinking. You begin things already expecting them not to be enough. You pursue what you want with one hand while quietly holding yourself back with the other. And then you stand there genuinely wondering why nothing ever quite works the way it should, not yet understanding that you have been your own greatest obstacle long before any external challenge had a single chance to stop you. Enter boldly or honestly, with full respect for yourself. Do not enter at all, because a half-committed attempt made while already bracing for the worst, while one part of you stays safely near the exit, is neither real effort nor real protection. It is the worst possible combination, all the vulnerability of trying with none of the power and momentum of full, genuine commitment behind it. Give yourself complete and unconditional permission to want what you want, fully, to believe in it without reservation, to show up for it with absolutely everything you have. The 1,000 failures you have already rehearsed in the private theater of your mind, not one of them was real, not a single one. Stop letting failures that have not happened yet determine the life that is still completely available to you. If today is the day you stop overthinking and start actually moving, show me in the comments. I start before ready. Lesson 10. The hardest moment always comes right before the breakthrough. What feels like the end is usually the beginning. If you have made it this far, I want you to know something. Not as a formality, not as a neat way to wrap everything up, but because I genuinely mean every single word of this, and because you need to hear it right now more than you might realize. You have come so much further than you are giving yourself credit for. Think about where you were 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 5. Think about the things that felt completely unsurvivable at the time, the losses that broke you open, the failures that made you question everything, the moments where the entire foundation of what you had built gave way beneath you and you genuinely did not know, in the most honest and frightened part of yourself, how you were going to find a way to keep going. And yet, here you are, still going, still trying, still showing up every single day for a life that has not always been easy, for a future that has not always been clear, for a version of yourself that you have been patiently and persistently working toward through every single hard season without exception. That is not a small thing. That is not something to move past quickly. That is everything. But I also know, because this is how it works for almost every person who is building something real, that right now in this season it feels like one of the hardest pushes you have ever faced. Like you have been going for a very long time and the finish line is still not visible from where you are standing. Like you are running on reserves you are not even sure you still have. Like the version of you that first began this journey had more energy, more certainty, more unshakable belief that it was all going to come together somehow. And so the thought comes, quietly at first, then with more and more force and more apparent reason behind it. Maybe it is finally time to stop. I need to tell you something important about that thought. In the world of long-distance running, every experienced runner knows about something called the wall. It comes deep into the race, not at the beginning when energy and motivation are both high, not even in the difficult and grinding middle section, but right near the very end, when the body has been working for a long time and suddenly and convincingly makes its loudest argument yet for stopping completely. Every muscle sends the same signal. Enough. Every breath becomes harder than the last. Every single step requires a separate negotiation. Everything in the body screams with complete conviction, this is as far as we go. And here is the thing that experienced runners know, the thing that beginning runners have to learn the hard and painful way. The great Confucius, whose wisdom has survived and remained true for thousands of years, said it in the simplest and most enduring way possible. Fall 7 times, stand up 8. Not fall 7 times and reassess whether standing is a reasonable goal. Not fall 7 times and consider whether the ground might actually be a more comfortable place to stay. fall 7 times, and stand up 8. Every single time, without exception, because the wall comes right before the second wind, not miles away from it, not after more suffering and more waiting, right before it. At the point of closest approach to the finish, the body makes its most convincing and most urgent argument for stopping. And the people who push through, who refuse to quit at the exact moment quitting, feels the most justified and the most reasonable. They are not superhuman. They are not operating on reserves that other people simply do not have access to. They simply understand one crucial thing that changes everything. The feeling of hitting the wall is not evidence that the race is over. It is evidence that they are almost there. Your life works in exactly the same way. The season right before the breakthrough is almost always the hardest season of the entire journey. The pressure that feels right now like it is crushing you is simultaneously and quietly forming you into something strong enough to actually hold and sustain what is coming. The waiting that has felt the longest and the most unbearable has very often ended the closest to what you have been working and waiting and fighting for all along. And right now, in this exact moment, in this exact season that has been testing absolutely everything you have, you may be closer than you have ever been to the thing you have been reaching for. Your exhaustion is not accurate evidence that you are too far away. Exhaustion is a genuinely poor navigator. It measures distance in emotion and in feeling rather than in reality. And your feelings right now are understandably and completely legitimately tired. But your actual proximity to the breakthrough, the answered prayer, the result of everything you have been building, that is an entirely different measure. And it may be so much closer than the tired and worn-down parts of you can currently feel or believe. You have survived everything that came before this single moment. Every hard season without exception, every failure that felt final, every moment of doubt that made a compelling case for quitting, every person who walked away, every plan that fell completely apart, every prayer that seemed to disappear into silence without any response. You survived every single one of those things, and you did not just survive them. You learned from them. You grew through them. You carried something real and lasting and valuable forward from every single one. Do not stop now. Not today. Not when you are this close to everything you have been working toward. Rest if your body and your spirit genuinely need rest. Breathe deeply. Ask for help without shame. Lean on your faith, on the people who love you without condition, on whatever has kept you anchored through every previous storm. Give yourself full and complete permission to be human, to be tired, to be uncertain, to not always feel strong or sure or capable. But please, with everything I can genuinely say to you through these words, do not quit. Because the hardest moment always comes right before the breakthrough. And this feeling right now, this voice telling you that you cannot go any further, this whisper that maybe it is finally time to stop, this is not the end of your story. This is almost always, in every way that matters, the very beginning of what you have been waiting for. Push through. If something deep in you knows you are closer than you think, do not just feel it, declare it. I will not stop. Wherever you are right now, whatever brought you to this moment, whatever you have been quietly carrying, whatever you have been hoping for in the private spaces of your heart or silently afraid of in the dark hours of the night, I want you to hear this as clearly and as personally as words can possibly be heard. You are not behind. Whatever comparison you have been making to where you thought you would be by now, to what someone else has already built or achieved or become, to the timeline that a younger and less experienced version of you once drew for yourself with such certainty, that comparison is not the truth about your life. You are exactly where the full accumulation of your choices, your challenges, your growth, your losses, your learning, and your timing has brought you. And this place, this exact and specific place you are standing in right now, is a completely valid and entirely real starting point for everything that is still ahead of you. You are not broken, not by what happened to you in the past, not by where you came from or what you survived getting here. not by the mistakes you have made or the ways you have fallen short of the person you wanted to be or promised yourself you would become. You are a person in process, still being written, still becoming, still growing into something the current version of you cannot fully see yet. The story of your life is nowhere near finished. You are not too late for the dream you have been carrying, for the healing you have been working toward, for the starting over that terrifies you but will not leave you alone, for the becoming that keeps calling your name no matter how many times you try to silence it. People have found their true calling at 60, have rebuilt their lives completely at 50, have started over from absolute zero at 40, have become who they were always meant to be in ways and at times that surprised everyone, including themselves. The calendar is not your enemy. Your beliefs about what the calendar means and what it allows you to be are. These 10 lessons are not a checklist you complete once and move on from permanently. They are truths you return to again and again throughout your life. You will forget some of them in certain seasons. You will have periods where the old patterns come back quietly and without announcement, where you find yourself giving too much of yourself to the wrong people, where fear roots you in place, where you turn around and start living in the past again instead of moving steadily forward. That is human. That is every one of us without exception. But now you know, and knowing changes something real and lasting inside a person. Even when you forget, even in the seasons when these lessons seem furthest away, there is a part of you that will remember, and that part will keep calling you back to who you are becoming, back to waiting with genuine faith instead of quiet despair, back to protecting your inner world with wisdom and intention, back to the clean and freeing simplicity of truth, back to spending your irreplaceable time like it matters because it absolutely does. Back to choosing the power of silence over the exhaustion of pointless conflict. Back to moving in spite of fear instead of being permanently held still by it. Back to facing forward with everything you have. Back to believing clearly what you are shown by people and situations. Back to entering every room and every opportunity with your whole self fully committed. Back to refusing to quit when quitting feels the most tempting and the most reasonable. That is the transformation that these 10 lessons are pointing you toward. Not your circumstances magically changing first. Not life becoming easier before you become stronger. Not the world rearranging itself to accommodate the person you have always wished you could be. You changing first. You growing first. You becoming through practice and intention and the willingness to keep going when everything in you wants to stop. The kind of person that hard things cannot permanently defeat. And once these lessons truly sink in, once they stop being words you heard in a video one day and become truths you actually live by and return to and are genuinely shaped by, you will look at your life differently. You will move through the world differently. You will treat yourself and your time and your peace and your future differently. And if this video found you at exactly the right moment in your life, leave the most powerful reminder you can give yourself right now. I am just beginning.